Okay, so last night, Hoosiers win on the road in the Big Ten. Minnesota's not having the greatest year, but any road win in the Big Ten's pretty good, especially for this year's IU team.
It got us almost to 500. Like, we're almost mediocre. I think any win to get us to almost 500 is a great win.
But Gabe and I were talking earlier, and the question is, all they have is a Big Ten tournament for the most part. If they win a game or two there, not the whole tournament, do they have any sort of outside chance whatsoever to get into the NCAA tournament?
I think we do. I think if we win 2 games, we're in.
You think?
I think so.
So we have 1 regular season game left, and then we're obviously sort of timestamping the date of this recording now, which is not a big deal. So we win our final regular season game, win 2 in the Big Ten tournament. I don't know what, but I think it would give us like a first round bye. So win the second and third round of the Big Ten tournament. That would put us on are we on a 2-game streak now? 3-game streak now, right? So 4, that'd give us a 6-game win streak. I know the selection committee does like to see who's hot at the moment.
Absolutely.
Somewhat. My problem that I have, and I'm, my judgment is clouded by my bias, but I was thinking about this after they won last night and kind of watching them play, and all I could think was, despite how well we played at times last night, I just don't see how we compete at that level. I mean, I just feel like we would just get smoked up against about any team.
I go back to the KU game in December, and KU's a great team. We played them tough. We played well. Yeah. I think this team can compete. I think we've got great athletes. They just got to come together. So
I
and we've got momentum. You got to believe, boys. We can do it.
I want to do the Hoosier slow clap now.
Well, I like it. I like the optimism. I'm already looking at next year's. Does everyone come back? What does that look like? And we'll see. I don't know.
Yeah, if everybody came back, next year would be great. I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah,
I think you're right. I think we're going to lose 1 to the NBA, and but I think that between NIL and postseason kind of calm heads having conversation and seeing how pieces come together, I think we would have a pretty decent nucleus to develop around. Go to the portal.
No doubt.
I don't think you need to get 6-8 kids out of the portal.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, in my very uninformed, brain, that I think next year would be brighter than this year.
I agree.
Well,
how awesome is it? We're in March and we're excited about IU basketball.
If you'd asked me that 30 days ago, I said,
I was not excited.
Crazy.
Right.
I mean, if you'd asked me that in January, I'd say, yeah, we're going to be all right. We're definitely going to lose a few games, but we weren't going to go on that streak of losses that seems to plague us.
Yeah. The 3 wins in a row, good wins, winning last night on the road. Good stuff for IU basketball.
Yeah. I'm not on the, pitchfork, go down to campus and, fire Mike Woodson train.
No.
A lot of people are, but I think the silent majority says, hey, this was not going to be the best year. He took us to 2 tournaments in a row, more success we've had in a long time, which
without
sucks.
a doubt.
And that it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yep.
I will say this, and since we've already lost all our Purdue listeners, not that we've probably had that many to begin with,
they're still trying to figure out where the play button is.
Well, I kudos to them. They had a great season. They have a really good team. I like the way they play. I do hope they have success in the NCAA tournament this year, because we already last year they laid the egg, and that is what it is. So hopefully this year they
no.
I
would never. I will. I mean,
see, it's interesting for me. I didn't grow up in Indiana, so I wasn't, that rivalry wasn't in my blood. So I like Purdue. I think it's great when Purdue does well, and I think it's great for the rivalry. Yeah. I remember when I was at IU, at my fraternity house, I think it was in the NCAA tournament, we had the games on, and Purdue's doing well, and I'm cheering for them, and everybody looked at me like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
I'm like, Big Ten, Indiana, we cheer? They're like, no, we don't cheer for Purdue.
No.
But yeah, I think Purdue has done such a great job with their program. I think Painter has done an amazing job. And it's really a good playbook for IU to look at. of, hey, what has he done? How has he done it? I'd love to see them make a good run. This is their year.
And pizza sales in West Lafayette are up, so we'll get into that.
Yeah, he's biased. Like he's got a potential audience that he's got to perform for. I would just simply say that I agree 100% that they've got a great program. That Painter's done a really good job of building that. He's had a little bit of a roller coaster throughout, but that's just part of developing and growing a program.
No doubt.
They've gone from the cradle of quarterbacks, decades ago to the cradle of 7-footers. And it's just like a merry-go-round of big men there, and the development is phenomenal. So there's a lot of really good things going on in West Lafayette with the basketball program, and I will still not root for them to win because I can't. It just was sort of, ingrained in me.
I get it.
And I do like both football and basketball on the men's side when both teams are really good.
Oh, yeah.
Because we've seen too many years, especially in football, where both teams are playing like in the toilet bowl at the end of the season for who's the worst versus second worst in the Big Ten.
Yes. Yeah.
So it is nice when they're both good.
Yeah.
This
year, the IU women's team is so exciting to watch.
Yeah.
100%.
Totally.
I don't think that I've watched probably more women's basketball games in the past 2 years than I watched in my entire life.
Agreed.
And they are so much fun to watch. They play great basketball.
Yeah.
They're exciting. I love that the students go to the games.
Mm-hmm.
How awesome is that?
How who'd they play recently at home?
Iowa?
No. Or
after that?
After Iowa.
Oh, just the last home game was Maryland.
Maryland, yeah. So obviously, Iowa and Caitlin Clark comes to town and it draws a huge crowd, especially when Iowa's really good and IU's really good. So not only you see a really good basketball game against two top-ranked teams, but you're seeing, Caitlin Clark, who has become a household name, which is phenomenal for women's sports in general, let alone just women's college basketball. The game against Maryland, I saw a picture of the student section because the student section is first come, first serve. And so they line up ahead of time. And the line out the door was so long and so full of kids to go see a IU women's basketball game against a Maryland team that I don't think was ranked. I don't know where they were in the Big Ten, but
my son was there. He was in that line.
Awesome to see. And I admittedly, there was a time where I would watch women's basketball and be like, it's kind of boring. It's a little bit slow. It's not as physical. And then with the success of the IU women's team, pre Caitlin Clark, even going back 5 or 6 years ago when Terry Morton came in and started kind of turning things around a little bit, or carrying forward what was a decent program and just building upon that, I started watching again. I'm like, damn, these girls can ball. Like they're
insane.
They're fundamentally so sound. It's different clearly than men's basketball. Like the way they shoot's a little bit, like some of their techniques are a little bit different, but I'm hooked. I'm totally hooked.
We had a fraternity brother whose younger sister played for IU. And so she'd come over and play basketball with us in the back parking lot, 3-on-3, and she'd school everybody.
Where did you live at IU?
I was a beta.
Oh, that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Anybody, she didn't have to play basketball at IU for her to whip up on you guys.
But we'd go to the women's games to support her, and it was empty. So it's so awesome to see how they pack Assembly Hall and go support the team. Really super cool.
So I'm right with you in terms of having watched more women's college basketball in the last couple of years than I have previously in all the other years combined. I've actually been an IU women's season ticket holder for years, just from a point standpoint. Never really went to any games until finally, as my kids got older, my youngest was into basketball. We went to our first game 3 or 4 years ago. So it was on the rise, but wasn't quite where it was at or where it's at now. Everything was general admission.
Yep.
Couple thousand people, maybe 5,000 at most on a big game against Purdue or something like that. To go into the Iowa game a couple weeks ago, sold out. The atmosphere was every bit
electric,
as hyped as a men's game. It's pretty cool to see.
Super cool. Yeah. My son is a sophomore. My daughter is a senior. Last year, they went to every game together.
Okay.
And this year, they went to every game until my daughter's home student teaching in Carmel this semester. But up until that point, every game they go to together. So really cool.
Let's shift the conversation a little bit from basketball to family ties. They go to they meet up and say, "Hey, let's go and sit together at the game."
Absolutely.
Like sibling love.
Yes.
Interesting.
Isn't that
How
great?
do you get that to work?
No clue. No clue. We didn't even know what was happening.
My wife did it.
Yeah. We didn't even know what was going on. All of a sudden, they're sending us, they'd send us a picture and we're like, do you guys go to every game together? Oh, yeah.
That's cool.
That's cool. Yeah. That's because the women's games are just open seating. And so, yeah, they each go with a couple of their friends. They meet up and they go together.
So I have my oldest is my son and my middle is my daughter. They're one academic year apart. So like he's a junior in high school. She's a sophomore in high school. So we're just on the front end of the college search process. But I keep saying to my wife, I'm like, how do we get them to go to the same school? They're two different students with different interests, but like, how do we get them? Because that would it'd be cool for them, I think, from us just building that sibling bond, but be really convenient for mom and dad too.
No doubt. No doubt. Yeah. Yeah, especially when you have big weekends, it's kind of nice to be able to go to the same spot rather than have the divide and conquer kind of mentality. But we were lucky. All of our kids chose IU and we didn't push them. The one rule that I had was you're not going to go to an out-of-state big school. That
you're not going to pay out-of-state tuition at another state school.
Right.
Yeah.
We have IU, we have Purdue, we have great in-state schools.
Yep.
We're not going to send you away to go to Ohio State or Illinois or Wisconsin.
We're definitely not.
But if you have a good argument to make for a smaller school or a special program, let's take a look at it. And so had an open mind and said, hey, you guys look around, choose where you want to go. They all ended up choosing IU, which was great. So
I was going to go close mine around saying, if you want mom and dad to pay for it, you can go to IU. If you want to take on debt, you can go anywhere else.
You go wherever you want.
Right. Yeah. I'm right there with you. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Industrious Podcast. Thank you all for joining us from wherever you get your podcasts, or if you're joining us on the Assess YouTube channel, thank you for doing so. We greatly appreciate that. Today, as you have heard, we've got a fellow Hoosier alum, Mr. Gabe Connell of Hotbox Pizza. Gabe, welcome to the Industrious Podcast.
Thanks. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. We touched on a lot of things. We talked about college, but let's go back to the early days. Born and bred and raised, and what then brought you to Indiana?
All right. So born in Chicago, south suburbs of Chicago. Growing up, my dad was a garbage man. So we grew up very blue collar. Moved to St. Louis when I was 12. And my dad, kind of interestingly, he was a garbage man when I was a little kid, moved up. He worked for waste management, moved up into management. Never went to college. I think he started taking some maybe nighttime classes, moved into management with waste management, and they ended up moving him to St. Louis. So we moved there when I was 12. And that was a big step. I remember when we moved to St. Louis, we thought we're rich. Like we moved into a bigger house than we could have, imagined in Chicago, and very different neighborhood. But really liked St. Louis, enjoyed it. When I was a senior in high school, I started looking around of, hey, where do I want to go for college? My older brother went to Kansas, and I didn't want to go to KU and just go there and be his younger brother. I didn't want to go to Mizzou, only from the standpoint of it seemed like the majority of my high school went to Mizzou. So thought, hey, where else could I go? And kind of the rules were I had to go somewhere where I could drive. We couldn't afford to fly back and forth. IU was known, obviously, then and still now for having a great business school. So IU was the only school I applied to. Thankfully, I got in because I didn't have a good backup plan. And so went to Indiana. Loved my time at IU. Started dating my wife our sophomore year at IU. Actually, a good friend of mine from high school was a sorority sister of hers, and she set us up our sophomore year. And she's from Indy, went to North Central High School. Her whole family is from Indy, aunts and uncles and grandparents. And I remember saying to her our senior year, just so you know, I'm never going to live in Indy. And she said, okay. And here I am after, 25 years later, still living
nice work,
here
Michelle.
And loving it. But, at the time, to me, Indianapolis I wanted to go back to maybe Chicago or, move to a coast or do something. But I think Indy's awesome. I love it. Great town to live in. So after IU, went to work for Black & Decker, which was I was a marketing major, typical sales job coming out of IU, and loved Black & Decker. Great people, really great culture. But always had this desire and always said, one day I'm going to own my own business. Had no idea how I was going to do that. I started off in Louisville, Kentucky with Black & Decker. Then I was moved to Columbus, Ohio. When I moved to Columbus, my wife had a aunt and uncle who lived in Columbus. And it was kind of an interesting story. They said to me, they said to Michelle, hey, Gabe should move in with us if he's going to move to Columbus. And I'm thinking, well, that's very nice of them, but I've only met them a couple times and I'm not going to move in with them. To make a long story short, I really had no time to find a place. So I called them. I said, hey, I don't know if you guys were serious about that, but would you mind if I moved in with you just for a little bit until I kind of figured out where I can get an apartment? They're like, absolutely. That'd be great. They were living in California. They were building a house in California, so kind of back and forth. So they gave me the address of the house. I pull up to the house and I'm like, pull up this beautiful, Meridian Kessler style mansion. And I called Michelle. I'm like, what does your uncle do? Like, I thought he owned a couple roller skating rinks. She said, oh, he does. And he does this, this, and this. And turned out he was just sort of a serial entrepreneur, great guy, very successful. And so it's really kind of cool for me to be there. And when they would come home, have time to talk with him and learn from him. And one time he said to me, what do you want to do with your life? And I said, well, I want to own my own business. And he said, okay, great. How are you going to do that? And I thought, I have no idea. I have no clue. I just thought, well, I'm going to wake up one day and just go start my own company. So he said, well, look, we have several small businesses. What would you think about coming to work for us and get sort of a hands-on MBA in how to run a small business? And I thought it sounded like a great idea. So I left Black & Decker and went to work for their roller skating business. I don't roller skate. I know nothing about roller skating, but it was a great opportunity to learn about how do you drive revenue, how do you control expenses, how do you develop people, all the things that go into running a small company. Whereas at Black & Decker, which I loved, all that I was seeing was one side of the business. I was just seeing sales. Mm-hmm. So it was really a great opportunity. And as he sort of put it, hey, if you don't like it, you can always go back and get a job doing similar things to what you're currently doing. So it's really a great opportunity for me to dive in and say, okay, let me learn how to run a small company and then take it from there. So
we're the same age at 51-ish or 27-ish. Looking back now, and it crazy like how random occurrences happen that have now shaped what today is like.
Without a doubt.
I mean,
without a doubt.
Not to sound old when I say that, but like literally what are the odds you said, okay, you know what, I will go ahead and live with them? Because originally you were like, no way, that's weird.
Right.
And look what happened.
Without a doubt. It's strange how things happen. And it's weird too that I always had that I wanted to own my own business. I don't know where that came from or why. But interesting how things line up and sort of put me with somebody who is able to say, hey, I can help provide a roadmap for you to figure out how to make that happen.
We interviewed Nate Feltman, owner of the IBJ, a few days ago, and I was digesting our conversation, and his path was pre-law, law for a long time, and then left law to go and go into business. And I was trying to think about, because something in our conversation made me come up with the question, what is it that sort of is the catalyst for people that become business owners outside of, something that's a really clear path that they just were pulled along. And it's almost like the guy or gal that becomes the entrepreneur is the one that is willing to take the risk of jumping at those random little opportunities versus the ones that say they either don't see it as an opportunity or say, nah, I couldn't do that, or no, I'm not willing to give up my current gig, my corporate gig, whatever it is, to kind of leave that behind and take that jump.
Right.
You easily could have said to your uncle, I'm pretty good because you like having a job, like have the security of it. So I wonder if that's, just maybe that's that element of not just having the opportunity, but being willing to take it.
Yeah. And I think I know a lot of people who wait too long and they get too comfortable. So,
or they get married and have kids.
They get married, they have a mortgage, and then it's like, well, I'd like to do something, but I can't leave what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So I was fortunate that I was young. If I failed, it wouldn't affect a whole family, and it was an easy decision at that time. But yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons to say why something won't work. Talk yourself out of it. I think you're right. I think a lot of people, hey, I'd love to own my own business, but they don't want to do the things that are required. Or they can think of a lot of very valid, good reasons of, hey, this is a bad idea and here's why. And they don't look at, well, hey, I can make it work. I can make it happen.
Well, it's interesting because I in prep for interviewing you on the podcast today, I watched a video you did for Hotbox. It was like an internal video. And you made a comment. I think the question was something along the lines of, how do you recruit people to want to be a franchisee? And your response was, I'd spend most of my time trying to talk them out of why they'd want to do that.
Right.
And it was almost like, I want to pull back the curtain on all the griminess and challenges and stress and anxiety that comes along with building a business. I mean, it's a freaking grind. And I want them to see that first, not just the shininess of what the benefits are of being a business owner.
Without a doubt. Yeah. I feel like our job is, especially on the franchisor side of the business, is we're not here to try to talk people into it. They've got to want to do it. And if I can talk them out of it with, well, hey, you're going to work nights, you're going to work weekends, you're going to miss family events. If they say, oh, that's not for me, better to figure that out in that conversation than for them to invest a lot of money, a lot of time and say, oh, I don't like this. I didn't know I was going to have to work on a Saturday. So let's figure that all out in advance. And if it's not for them, that's okay. So
yeah, I remember growing up, both of our parents were entrepreneurs, and we came from a very sort of immigrant-based entrepreneurial family, which I think is what was instilled in us, this desire to want to go out there and build our own thing. But our mother owned frozen yogurt stores throughout Indianapolis back in the 90s, or 80s, 90s, and early 2000s before she finally sold them all. And, that's, I don't know what category of restaurant that falls, like fast casual, maybe, even though it's not a full service food. I don't know what you would call it, but I remember, she was sick as a dog in bed one morning, like head cold, all that stuff. Manager calls in sick. When you're that level, like she had to get out of bed and go open the store up and wait for, employees to come in. That was like one of those, this is the not glamorous side of doing your own thing.
Right. Right.
No matter how big you scale it, at the end of the day,
the buck stops here.
Exactly. You still have that accountability.
Yeah. What kind of impact do you think that had on you guys growing up, seeing that? Did you guys work in the business? The yogurt stores?
I mean, we were the high school, college kids, time off, we'd go in and work shifts. And so two things came from that. Number one is, and I know you deal with this, when you have a 16-year-old employee, and no offense, 16-year-olds, if there are any actually listening or watching this podcast, they'll call in 15 minutes before they're supposed to show up for their shift and say, oh yeah, I can't make it for dog ate my whatever. And it's like, well, shit, like, thanks for the 15-minute notice.
Right.
She certainly had to deal with that. I think, I was a 16-year-old working there. I had friends of mine from high school that would have jobs there as well. There was something about, even at 16, I was not mature. But at 16, knowing that the name was kind of on the door, it wasn't mine, but it was my parents, shaped that a little bit. And then, as Joe was mentioning, going forward a few years, just that experience said, hey, this is something I want to do. I want to have something of our own, whatever that ends up being. We don't know, but I think it certainly shaped.
That's cool.
And knowing you have to wear multiple hats.
Yeah.
I mean, just, it is what it is. Like,
right.
You're not just going to be at the management level all the time. If the floors need to be mopped and something gets spilled, you need to clean it up. Like,
right.
Freaking do it.
Yeah. So did you guys resent the business at all, or did you always sort of embrace it?
No, I mean, all the frozen yogurt you can eat was amazing.
That's pretty cool.
Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And then,
there's a lot of stories that evolve from working there. That
one of the locations was at the fashion mall. So when you're a high school kid working the fashion mall and you see all the, all your friends and all the people from others, you worked hard, obviously, but there was a social element because we were also, I went to Chittard High School, but people I worked with went to North Central and Carmel. And so it was its own little chance to kind of get to know kids from different schools because this was pre-internet.
Right.
So it's not like you had all these friends on Snap or Instagram or whatever hell they're all on these days. But I can say that it was such a formative experience for me that when our kids, the rule in our house is once you get your license, you have to have a part-time job. And so it's great if they want to do lawn care or babysitting, kind of all cash, but that's not a real job in the sense of you've got a boss and you've got coworkers and you have customers. They need to be in the real world experience where they get a paycheck and they see gross and net and all that stuff.
Right.
So we didn't tell our son, who was the first one to get his license, here's where you have to work. But he was strongly pushed to go work in a restaurant environment because the service industry, it probably offers the widest array of challenges and experiences that one could learn because you've got all the things. You've got the boss, you've got the coworkers, you've got the product, you've got the quality of service and product that you have to provide, but you also get to see both the best and worst of humans.
Right.
Because you've got really good customers who are friendly and kind and patient. And then you've got, the assholes.
Yeah.
That are, demeaning, whatever. Because here you are, just some teenage punk that's clearing tables and filling waters and whatever. And some people just kind of feel like they've got this power trip over you.
Right.
And so it teaches, he's coming home and saying, God, this is what happened. He's telling me some good things, some bad things. I'm like, yeah, this is good.
Yeah.
Because you're going to experience that the rest of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's good to hear. I was always worried about that with my kids. Would they resent the business at some point? I like that they still feel like they learned a lot. They worked in our store since they were little kids. On the weekends when I've got to go to stores, the kids would, oh, hey, can we go too? And they'd want to go with. And Michelle would always, I'd give them jobs like, hey, the mop bucket needs to be cleaned. She's like, you're making them clean the mop bucket? I'm like, well, it needs to be cleaned and something they can do. Yeah. And they love doing it. So,
well, that's interesting. So I have a question for you, and this is really for anyone out there who either is currently a business owner of any level or thinking about, if you're a younger listener, one of the top, I don't know, say it's if you write the top 10 principles of being a business owner, of things that you have to do, one of them is you have to have a succession plan. Mm-hmm. As a small business owner that's clearly grown, and kids that have grown up in the business, do you have a formal succession plan, and have they exhibited any interest in getting involved?
They all talk about it, but I want them to go do their own thing. So our oldest daughter, who went to IU, she was a Kelly student at IU. She works for a company called Axiom in Chicago. Great marketing mind. Our daughter, who's a senior at IU, is an education major. She's going to be a school teacher. She'd be a great director of training. Our son is a sophomore at IU, accounting and finance major, so he would be great on the accounting side. So they would make a great team together, but I want them to all go to do their own thing.
Yeah.
And certainly. At some point, my goal is to have a company that would be attractive enough to them that they would maybe say at some point, hey, I'd like to come back and be a part of that. They've all worked really hard in our business since they were little kids, throughout high school, throughout college. I want them to go do their own thing and not say, hey, this is my business, so you have to come in. It's not their job to be my succession plan. If they get to a point where they say, hey, we really like the company and we think we could add value, I'd love to have that conversation with them. But I want them to go do their own thing for a while first before we get there.
Yeah, totally agree with that. I say that to a lot of kids coming out of school too. Even if your parents have a family business that you could go into, go somewhere else first.
Yep.
I mean, we all make a lot of mistakes from that 22 to 25 range or later. Go cut your teeth on someone else's dime and figure out what you think you really want to do. Is this a path you really want to take?
Right.
And go from there.
Yeah. And find your passion. This is mine. It doesn't have to be theirs.
Correct. You mentioned about my daughter, who's an education manager, is going to be a teacher, could be a great director of training. In your world, you hire people, you employ people that probably run the gamut of educational experience or qualification. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to repetition, consistency, which was derived out of training. How do you control both corporate-owned restaurants as well as franchise locations and having, hourly workers that might be part-time, high school kids to managers to people working in the corporate office, all, the whole spectrum. How do you successfully make sure that every single time a pie goes out, it meets the consistency and quality level that you guys expect? Like, how do you train to that?
It's tough. We have a great director of training who does a good job of working with the stores. We have great materials for the stores. The challenge is, are they utilizing them? The kind of rules that we have are, when you have a new hire, you start them on a Monday or Tuesday. Don't bring them in on a Friday night and expect that they're going to have a chance to actually learn anything. So start off slowly. Take the time to go through the PowerPoints, the videos with them, explain in great detail how we do everything. So we have a process. The challenge is the process always being followed? The great thing is that, especially in today's day and age of social media, we get great feedback from customers. People are taking pictures, posting it. Back when we were little kids, there'd be a restaurant reviewer for the local paper who once a week would go visit a restaurant and write a review. Now we have thousands of reviews every day.
Keyboard warriors.
Right. Yeah. And, and it's good and bad.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of value and a lot of stuff you can learn. And then that's great stuff that we then can work with the store and say, okay, hey, where's the problem here? Let's diagnose it. Sometimes it's just a snapshot. It's that just happened to be, we had hundreds of customers that day. We slipped up right there and we can learn and move on. And sometimes it's a systematic error and we have to figure out, okay, how do we correct this moving forward? But the feedback is great. So what I never understand is when, if somebody gives 5 stars and they're just wowed with service, or they give 1 star, it's like, oh, this was just a huge letdown. I don't understand like the 3-star review. Why take the time to say, everything is okay? So
right. Yeah.
I understand if somebody's like really impressed or if they're really let down. I don't understand the ones in the middle, but the feedback is awesome.
Do you have something, being such a on the ground consumer product, right? Like we're literally consuming the product.
Yep.
Do you have someone or a team of people that are really monitoring the feedback on particularly social media or Google reviews or any of the things now that are all, internet based? Do you have people monitoring that and either responding back out there into the digital world or just taking it to sort of analyze internally?
Yep. So we have 2 people. Our director of marketing is the one who responds back to the customer. And then our director of operations is the one who takes that then to the store level and says, okay, hey, let's take a look at this and let's kind of figure out what was happening with this. So what we don't want to do is ignore it. People want to be heard. Mm-hmm. And when they feel like, hey, I'm just yelling into a canyon, it doesn't feel good to them. Right. So saying, hey, we hear you. Sometimes there's something we could do about it. Sometimes it happened. It's in the past. And a lot of times people say like, oh, I don't want anything. I just want to let you know.
Yeah.
So our rule is we still want to do something for them. But they want to know that, hey, they're heard. So we want to respond, hey, thank you for your feedback. But then we want to take it to the store level and say, okay, how do we fix this? How do we prevent it from happening again? We will make mistakes, but when we do, we want to make sure we take care of the customer and then we learn from it and improve moving forward.
Yeah. Going back a bit, so you're doing the roller coaster or the roller skating thing. At what point, how long did that last? And at what point was the next iteration?
Yeah. So I did that for a number of years. So I started in Columbus, Ohio. They own 2 roller skating rinks here in Indianapolis. And I forget this. I think like they had a general manager just walk out in the middle of a day and just say, I'm done with this.
Here in Indy.
Okay. And so the president of the company, who worked for my wife's uncle, said, hey, you went to IU, your girlfriend at the time lives in Indy. We're going to move you to Indy. And I was all for it. Hey, great. Chance to be close to Michelle, be back in Indiana. That'll be great. So I came to Indiana and took over a roller skating rink that was at 56th and 465 on the east side of town. And again, I wasn't like a roller skating enthusiast. I didn't know.
You weren't skating backwards by that point? Going to the concession stand and buying super ropes?
I could make cotton candy. That was about the extent of my skill level at the roller skating rink. But it was a lot of just learning, figuring it out as we went. And that skating rink was losing a little bit of money, breaking even, and we turned it around to where it was making a decent profit. Then the manager on the west side of town was leaving, and they said, "Hey, you're doing pretty good with one. You want to take two?" And it's like, "Sure, let's go for it." So I took over the 2 skating rinks, did that for a while, and then put together an opportunity to sort of, I'm going to say in quotes, own the skating rinks. Basically, they own them. I had a management company where we put together a lease, essentially, where they said, this is the amount of profit that we want from the business. Anything above that is yours. So I would pay them lease payments based on the profit that they wanted. Anything that I could do above that, I got to keep. And it was exciting. I think I was 26 years old, 27 years old. So I think I was enamored with the idea of saying, hey, I own a business. In reality, I didn't own much other than the right to earn money. But it was a really great experience, great learning. But really the big takeaway for me was I have to do something I love doing. I have to do something I'm proud of. I was never proud of the skating business. I wasn't excited about it. And I hit a point where I thought, I want to do something that I want to have 20 of or 50 of or 100 of, not something that I'm trying to figure out, how do I get rid of one of these? I have 2. How do I get down to 1? So that was a point, and there was a concept down in Bloomington called Pizza Express. It's now called Pizza X, that I just loved. I remember I had to do a project my junior year for a marketing class on a brand that has a cult following. And at the time, this was pre-internet. So everybody would go to the library and you'd look up articles on Apple or Nike or a company like that. I went to Pizza Express and I said, hey, I want to do a project on you guys for my business class. And when I was looking at what they did and that they were just in Bloomington, I thought, why not grow outside of Bloomington? Why not follow your graduates and go to where they go?
Which I'm sure many IU alum have said when they moved to Indy after graduation, like, why is there no Pizza Express up here?
Right. Absolutely. And so their response at the time was, hey, we're good being a Bloomington company. And they owned several brands down in Bloomington, Pizza Express, Lenny's, Bloomington Brewing Company.
Okay.
And they were just kind of said, hey, we're ingrained in Bloomington. This is where we want to be.
But I want a Big Ten bargain in Indy now.
Yeah. And so Michelle and I would drive from Indy down to Bloomington on a fairly regular basis just to get pizza and breadsticks, and kept thinking, why don't we do this outside of Bloomington? So fast forward a number of years later, approached them again and said, hey, we want to do this. Do what you do outside of Bloomington. And so our first couple stores we did with them as a license agreement where we could license the name Pizza Express. Later, we learned that the name Pizza Express, we couldn't trademark it because it's a generic name. And so we had to break off from them and have a name that we could actually trademark and own and grow in that direction. But our first few stores, we worked with them. We were Pizza Express, and then we had to rebrand. And actually, we did a customer contest. Said, hey, we need a new name. Can you help us figure out a new name?
I can only imagine some of the submissions.
Great names.
I just have to say, I did vote for the current name.
Did you?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll end the conversation.
I was partial to Wacky Jackie's Pizza Shacky, but that did not fly. So, but we had several hundred names suggested.
What was Michelle's reaction when you threw that out?
Which one?
That name.
Wacky Jackie.
Yeah.
Still, if you ask her today, what was her favorite pizza name? Wacky Jackie.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, she loves it.
Oh, I thought for sure I could see her sitting there and you say that and be like, no.
We ran out of room on the box to get the whole name in.
No. It's funny. And I liked Hotbox when it was suggested. So we had a few hundred names suggested. We let our employees narrow it down to their top 6. And Hotbox kind of jumped out at me. It's like, hey, it's edgy. It's a little creative. It catches your attention.
Lots of options.
Yeah. And at the time, I just read a book by Seth Godin called The Purple Cow.
Yeah.
And it talks about how if you're starting a company, you need to stand out. You can't go into a business and just kind of blend in with everybody else. And I thought, hey, Hotbox, definitely stands out. So we sent that list of 6 out to our customers, said, hey, here are the 6 finalists, vote on your favorite. Hotbox was the clear winner. But I remember talking to a delivery driver at our Broad Ripple store, and I said, hey, what do you think? Hotbox, kind of edgy, you got the whole innuendo with it. He's like, yeah, the drug thing, I think it plays out. I'm like, the what thing? He's like, the smoking pot thing. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. What do you mean? So he explained to me what hotboxing was. And I'm like, oh, I guess it still kind of plays with the name. Not what I was thinking, but okay.
Once you're done doing that, do you get hungry and then you want pizza?
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
it works.
So we could play a lot of different things here.
Right. So what I liked about it, though, is that it could be edgy, but it's also just straightforward. It's pizza in a box. It's hot. So it could be straightforward, or you could have fun with it and play off of it. And so that was how Hotbox was created as a brand. I remember at the time we used Exact Target, which Scott Dorsey and Chris Baggett had just started. We used their email as a way to kind of communicate with our customers and have that interaction. And at the time, I know the idea now, everything is live and communication flows back and forth. But at the time we felt like, hey, this is really creative that we're letting our customers be a part of this, help us pick our brand, help us choose our name, help us shape the company. So it was a fun experience to have, without a doubt.
Yeah. What was your vision early on? I mean, was it, hey, let's start this concept here in Indy, trying to bring Pizza Express, now Hotbox to Indianapolis, or was the vision, hey, let's start and then let's blow this thing up?
Yeah, good question. So the idea originally was, let's bring it to Indy and then grow into other college markets. And originally I thought we're only going to go to college markets. So our first few stores were downtown Indy near IUPUI, Broad Ripple near Butler, then West Lafayette at Purdue. And then the thought was, we're just going to keep expanding into college markets. We had people continue to say to us, hey, when are you going to open in Fishers, Greenwood, Carmel, Brownsburg?
Yeah, I want what I had in college.
Right.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, we're not. We're college pizza. We're not suburban pizza.
Yeah.
And it kind of hit me that just because people get older and move to the suburbs or have kids, it doesn't mean that they all of a sudden now have a completely different vision of themselves or a different identity. So it's like, hey, if we followed graduates from Bloomington to Indy, why not follow them as they move into the surrounding suburbs? And so the first residential store that we opened was Fishers, and realized that, hey, this works. People, just because they're living out in the suburbs and they're married and have kids, doesn't mean that they say, well, I don't care what I eat anymore, or I don't care what brands I associate with anymore. And so I remember early on, we worked with a marketing company here in town. They said, well, who's your demographic? I'm like, well, what do you mean? They said, well, the age, income, what does your average customer, your ideal customer look like? And I struggled with that. And I remember, I think it was that night or a night later, I was at our store in Broad Ripple and getting busy. A lot of deliveries were coming in. I thought, all right, I'm going to hop on the road and take some deliveries. And I take one delivery to, a beautiful house in Meridian Kessler. A guy who's probably in his late 40s answers the door, ordered pizza. My next delivery is to an apartment where 8 guys were hanging out playing Xbox. I'm like, okay, these are both my customer. Right. How do you sum that up? And the realization is, the guy who's in his mid 40s ordering, in his mind, he's still that 20-year-old hanging out with his buddies playing Xbox. So it's a mentality more than it is, how old are you? That was, where we sort of said we want to fit in. It's that we want to appeal to people who are social and they get together with other people to watch games, go out to concerts, have parties. That's our customer. And it doesn't matter if you're 15 or 55. That's our customer.
Yeah. And if you have presence in either direct or indirect in Bloomington and West Lafayette, and those multiple thousands of graduates each year start to come to Indy, they can continue the tradition of buying your pizza or pizza like what they're used to in the Indy market. And at the end, you say, hey, we solved the brain drain.
Absolutely.
There you go.
Also, just pizza and breadsticks.
That's all we need.
Yeah.
Look out, San Francisco, New York.
Right.
We're bringing everybody to Indy.
Exactly.
I mean, it is an election year. You could get on the gubernatorial ticket here. I'm just saying.
That's all we need. Yeah.
I think I'll speak for Gabe, where Gabe's like, yeah, I'm not interested in politics. I'll stick with pizza.
No.
So you guys have company-owned stores as well as franchisees.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about that environment and, not that you have a preference, but like as the company continues to grow, where do you see those sides being weighted? Do you think they're 50-50? Do you think you still have more company stores, or will franchising take over ultimately?
It's a good question. So we have 7 company-owned stores, 16 franchise locations. We want to grow, and the idea is we don't want to fight with franchisees for locations. We want franchisees who will be successful.
Yep.
A story that I love is we have a store in Columbus, Indiana, that we were going to open up as a company-owned store. We had a district manager who'd worked for us for about 5 years. Great guy, lived in Columbus, grew up there. His wife grew up there. Their families were there. And he said, hey, if I could ever get the money together, I would love to own that store. And I said, well, let's talk about that. What are your goals? And he said, I love being a district manager. I'd love to keep growing the company with you guys, but my ultimate dream would be to own my own hot box. He's like, I would love to do that. And so we put together an opportunity. We essentially financed him opening up that store, and he is crushing it. He's doing incredibly well. And, people have said to me like, oh, does it kill you that you gave that store up? And no, it's like first of all, I love that he's being successful.
Right.
But also as a franchisor, we need successful franchisees. And there's a ton of examples of companies that have said, we're going to take all the A locations and then we'll franchise out the B and the C locations. Mm-hmm. And they fail because they're not letting their franchisees be successful. Mm-hmm. So the Fisher store is a good example. Originally, we owned that store as a company-owned store. We sold it to one of our managers as a franchisee. It's one of our best stores. But I truly believe that a lot of that success is having an owner who is there on a daily basis, dialed into the community, and really make sure that things are running smoothly. So whether it's Columbus or Fisher's, those franchisees having success, their success is our success.
Yeah.
And we need them to be successful. And Mike, I would argue that they are more successful with that store than we would be trying to manage it from Indy. So, so love seeing their success. So as we grow, if we identify a good location and there's not a franchisee who wants to do it or able to do it, we'll do it as a company-owned store. But if a franchisee raises their hand and says, hey, I want that store, we're not going to stand in their way.
Yeah. That Columbus story, that's a good one. I like that.
It's super cool. Yeah,
and really I'm glad that he's doing well also. To your point, it tells a good story, not just for other franchisees. Hey, here's a great example, but just what you guys did and working with him. That's very cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's great. Now he's looking for store number 2. He's been open, just hit his 2-year mark. Nice. So now he's ready to look at store number 2, but really just cool. And when he first opened, he had his wife working there. She still works there, his kids. His dad was coming in and being a delivery driver. It was just really cool to see. So love seeing his success.
Yeah.
Do you often drive to Columbus for pizza?
I can't say that I do know. Well, not when I had it right here.
Oh, okay.
To the extent that you can share, in your mind, what does the future of Hot Box Pizza look like?
From my standpoint, what I want to do is continue to have steady, sustainable growth. I always say that, here we are, we've been in business for 20 years. We have 23 locations. There are other people, if they were at the helm of Hot Box, it would be 1,000 locations by now. And there are other people that it would have been closed up and bankrupt, years ago. And then everything in between. So from my standpoint, I like to say it's a brand that I care about. And I see a lot of companies that are just out opening up stores. And anybody who shows up with a check, they'll say, yep, you can be a franchisee. Here you go. And you see a lot of them closing stores as fast as they're opening them. I feel like that's reckless. I feel like that's, I want to make sure that when we're opening up a store, whether it's a company-owned store or a franchisee, we think that there's a high probability that this store is going to be successful. We think there's a high probability that this store is going to be open in 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and it isn't who knows? I don't know if they'll make it or not, but if they don't, we'll just flip it to somebody else and just have a revolving door of owners. So I want to make sure that we're doing things in the right way. COVID, we put the brakes on any sort of growth during COVID. The uncertainty of what's going to happen with this, how long is it going to last? I remember our oldest daughter was doing a semester in Barcelona during that time. I remember calling her and saying, hey, you need to get to the airport. You got to fly home. And she's like, well, do I pack everything? I'm like, I don't know. Yeah, why don't you pack everything? But you'll probably go back in a couple weeks. You know, who
2
knew?
weeks to stop the spread.
Right. Who knew how long this was going to last? So we stopped all sort of growth during COVID and said, hey, this is just very uncertain. As we came out of COVID, the problem was we couldn't get anybody to work. No applicant flow at all. So the idea of going out and saying to somebody, hey, why don't you buy a franchise? Why don't you invest all of your time and money into doing this? Oh, and by the way, you can't find anybody to work. You're going to have to be answering the phones, making the pizzas, delivering the pizzas because nobody is looking for work right now.
Oh, by the way, the phone's ringing off the hook because everybody's
sitting at home in their sweatpants ordering pizza. Yeah. So that was a tough time. And that dam finally broke last year, early 2023, first quarters. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, people are applying again. Oh, they're showing up for interviews. Like, this is unique. And we were able to staff our stores again, which was just felt good. And by the end of this year, we had a lot of stores that were operating on abbreviated hours because they couldn't staff their normal operating hours. So stores were getting back to regular hours. They were staffed. It just felt so much better.
Yeah, anyone we've interviewed, post COVID, has really echoed the same experience that we've had in terms of labor challenges, finding people. So it took darn near 3 years for you guys, as you said, the dam broke in early 2023. What was, in your world, what was the biggest challenge or cause of the challenge of labor shortage?
Not to get too political with it, but in actually talking with employees who I had who quit, and we try to get them back. They say, "Hey, I got a big check. I'm getting money for not working. I'm making more money not working than I would if I was working. I'm going to wait this out."
Yeah.
And it was hard to argue that. And so I think, there was a lot of money flowing into people's pockets, which maybe at the time felt like the right thing or a good thing. You
can be political in the sense that both administrations did it. So it's like,
without a doubt.
Right. It's an even draw there.
Yeah. And so I think we just flooded, it's interesting. We're giving money to people at a time when there was nothing to spend money on, right? You couldn't go to sporting events, concerts, travel.
Pizza.
You could buy pizza. Yeah. And so it was kind of interesting. It's like, well, is this the solution? But I think people got a lot of money in their pockets. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we paid the price with inflation that followed that. But we had a lot of people said, I don't need to work. I've got money. And, my mentality is we'll save that money, keep working. But it was kind of like, nah, we're good. We're going to wait till this runs out. And it seems like that ran out first quarter of last year for a lot of people because all of a sudden we just had people applying, showing up for interviews, getting hired and coming in actually for orientation. So It's like, oh, this is all unique.
Yeah, we didn't get ghosted. Amazing.
Yeah. So, it's interesting. Our 7 company-owned stores at the end of 22, I think we were down to like 80 employees. A year later, we had 150. Okay. So nearly doubled our workforce. And it just feels better. I made more pizzas, delivered more pizzas in a 2-year period than I had in probably 10 years.
Yeah.
Just because we couldn't get people in. And it was that problem of, hey, the revenue's there. People want to order pizza. We don't have the staff to handle it. We were very, very fortunate that we have great customers who could not have been more understanding of the situation and knowing what was going on with people not working and everybody's understaffed. But, it's just, you feel horrible when, you're delivering a pizza that, should have been there 45 minutes ago and it's just going out now. But the thing we had to do in our stores was react to that and say, okay, let's not make pizzas that are going to sit on a warming shelf waiting for a driver. So we had to go into a new mode of operating of we don't make a pizza until we have a driver on their way to get it so that at least the customer is getting a hot, fresh pizza, not one that's been sitting around for an hour waiting to get to them.
Yeah, I will say kudos to you. And this is a great example of your work ethic. And that during that time, I remember we ordered and doorbell rings. I go to the door and it's Gabe. I'm like, what the hell are you doing delivering? He's like, I don't have any people, man.
Yeah.
I'm like, holy shit, I get it.
You got to do it.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah. I remember
he was late, but no, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Years ago, I met with Jimmy Leotard, who started Jimmy John's, and he was really generous with his time. Went to their headquarters is in Champaign, Illinois, and he spent several hours with me, just kind of offering his experience, insights. Cool. But he said, in our business, there's no ego. He said he still drives a 4-wheel drive vehicle because if it's snowing outside, he wants to be able to go help deliver sandwiches. And I've always kept that in my mind. That's why I still drive a Jeep Wrangler, because when it snows outside, I want to be able to say, hey, this is fun. Let's go play in the snow and deliver some pizza. But there is no ego in this business. And I think a lot of times when people are starting a company, they view themselves as maybe above the process and they don't want to get involved in the nitty gritty. But I think you have to, and you have to embrace it and say, hey, this is what we do. This is who we are. So, I always say we have a little office in the Broad Ripple area. I always say customers don't come in here. We don't make pizzas here. Everything happens at the store level. That's where the action is. Mm-hmm. And that's where we want to be. So being able to do everything in the store is important, especially at a time like that where, on a macro level, people just aren't entering the workforce. You have to be able to dive in and say, all right, we can do this.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's important what you noted there, that you never graduate out of having your hands in the work to some level, even if it's a minute level where I've got really good people to do the job. So I'm not going to do the job for them, which is demotivating. I'm not going to micromanage them, which is demotivating. But you just have to stay connected.
Right.
Because how do you ever continue to lead and manage effectively if you've lost sight of what's going on at all levels?
Right. Yeah. And you're right. There's that fine line between, am I devaluing them? Am I going in and doing the job for them? And they're feeling like, hey, you're stepping on my toes. Give me room to breathe here. And then also feeling like, hey, I don't do this. So having that role of, hey, if a store needs help, I'm willing to dive in and help out. If I pop in a store and they're busy, I want to be able to jump in and help out. Yesterday, I was driving by one of our stores at lunchtime. I'm like, I'm going to pop in and just see how they're doing. They were pretty busy. They were okay, but I was able to jump in and help them out. And I think, kind of that idea of servant leadership of, hey, I'm here to help you.
I'm a resource.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not going to walk around with a clipboard and mark them off for, oh, this isn't done right. It's like, hey, you guys are busy. Let me jump in and help out.
Yeah. All right. Here's a question for you. Now that we're 27-ish, if you were talking to your 26-year-old self now, or 25, whatever, somewhere in the 20s, what would you say to him or her?
Oh, God, great question. Probably a lot of stuff that I say to my kids now, which is figure out what you want to do, move in that direction, be curious, don't feel like you need to have all the answers, ask the right questions. I think I would have encouraged myself to be more deliberate in decisions. I think I would just kind of have knee-jerk reactions to things. I wish that I would have been a little bit more deliberate in a lot of my decisions, thought things through. I think maybe a lot of times entrepreneurs or business owners are sort of guilty of reacting fast, which can be an asset. But the downside is, are you really thinking through all angles of this? So you mentioned Nate with his legal background. I think people who have a legal background who go into business are great at that. They're great at asking questions, looking at things from all angles. I think sometimes just people who kind of just come from a pure entrepreneurial or small business background, it's just, oh, hey, that makes sense, let's do it, and don't really think it through. So I think if I were to look back, thinking things through, looking at other options, I think that if I saw one path, I would jump at it rather than say, okay, that's one option. What else is out there?
Yeah.
So
we always talk in our world, resisting the shiny object.
Yeah.
Because sometimes all they are distractions.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Yep. And sometimes they're very shiny. So without a doubt.
Yeah. Not necessarily there's anything wrong with the ready, fire, aim approach. Just, there's potential repercussions for it.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, you still might decide on that option. but looking at it, and not from the standpoint too of having sort of this analysis paralysis where you end up doing nothing because all you do is look at it from a million different angles. But I think a lot of times I just reacted to something because it sounded exciting rather than say, okay, hey, this is exciting. We want to move in this direction, but is this the best way to get there?
Right. Yeah. Well said. Well, hey, man, thank you for coming in today and taking the time. We appreciate it.
Thank you guys. Thanks for having me.
Great story.
Yep, you're welcome. And much continued success. And by the way, I have to throw this out. Hotbox has been a great part of the Heroes Foundation, so we really appreciate what you guys do for us on that end. We appreciate it. I'm sure the folks that we're serving there do as well.
Great cause. We're happy to help out.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Thank you for this tuning into this episode of the Industrious Podcast from wherever you get your podcasts, or those of you watching on the Assessa YouTube channel. Thank you for doing so. Don't forget, hit that subscribe button or the little notification bell icon if you haven't done so. We would greatly appreciate it. Until next time, don't forget, folks, be industrious.